Good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us on another edition of Reasonable Doubt, brought to you by the Harris County Criminal Lawyers Association. I'm your host, Jimmy Ardwan, along with my co-host, Julio Vela. Julio, how are you this evening?
Any day that I'm sitting across from Jason Long
Sort of
is a
catty
good
corner.
day. That's all I got to say.
That's all you got to say, of course.
There he
Ladies
is.
and gentlemen, there is our guest for this evening, Jason Long, back on the show. It's been way too long, my friend.
Thank you. Actually, I was commenting that everyone on this show, their names begin with the letter J, which must be a good show. Then.
Hey, Triple J, Reasonable Doubt.
It's like a ranch in Arizona or something, the Triple J Ranch.
That's right.
We'll figure it out, ladies and gentlemen. We're glad you could join us. We'll be spending the next hour talking with Jason. We got a lot of great topics lined up for tonight to talk about. We'll take your questions and comments on Twitter at HCCLA_TV. We'll also open up the phone lines about halfway through. 713-807-1794 is the number, so call us with your questions and comments. Please also, if you get a chance, check out our website, www.hcclatv.com. We've got a lot of great blog posts up there. They come up every week, and you can get a lot of really good information, really good writers on there too. All right, guys, we didn't get to talk about this last week because we had Ed Gonzalez on, but I wanted to talk about the DA debate because this thing got feisty and it got overshadowed by the Trump-Clinton fiasco that nobody really knew what was going on unless you were kind of in the know, so to speak, in the defense bar, in the prosecutorial world, kind of in the local political parties, I think. I don't know that a lot of people really knew what was going on. In fact, the moderator of the event was Cambrel Marshall from Channel 2, but Channel 2 didn't even air it. I mean,
did anyone air it? I don't know if they aired it anywhere. Was it only live only to watch? I
yes.
can't imagine it would have been.
Now, from what I understand, it was live streaming somewhere, but I don't know where because somebody was talking about it, and I couldn't find it. But
Well, and on
needless to say,
on the backlash of it, it's been all over the radio since.
right.
I mean, it's been everywhere. It's like, but nobody got to see it.
Nobody got to see it. And
they should rebroadcast it.
And so it kind of sounded like it devolved into a Trump rally with people shouting it at each other, not being able to keep some decorum in the place. And from what I understand, it turned kind of ugly with people shouting at one side or the other. Is this really what our DA race has come to now?
Well, and I think from what I hear is we have an incumbent, Miss Anderson, who's coming up against all sorts of issues and problems, and apparently Kim Ogg went at her. And it's continuing to come at her, and she responded.
You know, we had Kim on this show, and of course, she was pretty forceful, came at her on there, no doubt. And look, it's justified. I mean, there have been a series of issues that have occurred here leading up to the election. Poor timing, really bad timing for this all to come out. But it has really been hot button political issues.
It's going to be interesting because, the Republican Party kind of abandoned Devin Anderson because of the Planned Parenthood issue,
right?
Which is not a basis for the Republican Party to have abandoned her, and I'm not endorsing either party or side, but you really have her kind of standing alone trying to get reelected. And you know how politics works in Harris County. It's going to be a lot of down ballot or straight ticket voting, whether or not Republicans follow the slate. The Republican machine's very good about creating slates of candidate and but whether or not they will include Devin Anderson in their slates to encourage people to vote, it's not clear. I can't imagine they wouldn't support Devin, but this race, even in the last 2 years ago, was much closer than the countywide races. So there's a lot of individualization in this race, which will be interesting to see. And I think people are actually paying attention. I mean, Harris County apparently may become Democratic this time around. It'll be interesting what happens to all the prosecutors if Kim Ogg becomes the DA. That's going to be a huge seismic shift.
Well, is it though?
Yeah, they can't. You can't get rid of them all.
No, they're not going to. But I think a lot of people would voluntarily not stay. That's what I think. I think there's going to be an issue. I just remember the unhappy. I don't want to presume, but I just remember the unhappiness of people at the DA's office.
But that's kind of our job to presume and
of
speculate.
like
on
it.
the show.
Well,
that's what we do.
I know. It'll be interesting. It'll be interesting to see. But the things that happened some of it are her fault. Some of it's not her fault. I mean, you can't handle what the precincts do with their evidence collection, but I didn't see the full debate, but I don't remember hearing or seeing an answer of how she justified not notifying people that evidence was missing, other than to say, well, we didn't know which cases necessarily. But then you have to, I mean, that really doesn't solve the problem of whether people who are pleading and we don't have evidence, but we may not be sure, but let's not worry about it.
Well, that's what I mean, it's kind of what they're doing now is we're getting notices that saying, oh, hey, here's a precinct 4 case. Your stuff might have been destroyed. Just a heads up. They could have done that.
Well, it's like how, if you've ever done consumer law, it's cheaper for a company, or they perceive it to be less problem to go back and issue refunds than it is to have a recall, right? Which is kind of like what you would have here, which is having a widespread Harris County Constables Precinct 4 kind of recall of all these cases that are pending, saying, hey, hold on, we don't know what's happening. But now they'd rather go back and spend the large number of man hours and figure out who will actually didn't have evidence at the time. And of course, it takes resources for those people who may have wrongfully or improperly pled to go back and fix their case, rather than the DA. Clearly, if the evidence didn't existed, and we knew about it now, they've been dismissing cases. But where cases where evidence was not existing and you've already pled, I don't think the DA has created a policy that we're going to then retroactively grant petitions to overturn those convictions. Right?
Yeah.
So
I tend to think that most prosecutors don't want to win at all costs. There are some. But however, from the top-down mentality is that these prosecutors cannot make the discretion and do not have the discretion or authority to dismiss or make alternative arrangements for cases that shouldn't necessarily, that aren't fair. And so do you think that if Kim Ogg comes in, people will leave, or do you think people will say, finally, we can, have this discretion and that Kim Ogg's kind of pushing through?
I think that the DA's office prosecutors, they really love Devin Anderson, because she's one of them in a most recent sense, and there was a strong love at the office for Mike Anderson. So I think there's a loyalty to that issue, especially for those. I remember going to one of the debates between Pat Likas and Mike Anderson, and the love for Mike Anderson from the senior level folks was really overwhelming. And I think for that guard, they love the Anderson family, and rightfully so, given their connections and the job they did as prosecutors and as judges. But it's like the shift you had when Likas, I think people tolerated and sat through it, thinking that it was going to end. This is not a criticism of Kim Ogg. It's just an outsider coming in to replace someone who is a true insider from that core family of the DA's office.
Well, but that's the thing. Kim also worked at the DA's office. I mean, she was there. She's not an outsider coming in. I mean, I really have.
Democrat. That will make her an outsider for the for the DA's office.
Maybe, but I mean, look, it's really easy, I think, for the Republican Party, those in the Republican Party who don't want to get behind Devin for Planned Parenthood for whatever reason. But for those who don't want to get behind her, I think Kim is an easy candidate to get behind, because she's a former prosecutor. She was the head of Crime Stoppers. She isn't to me anyway, and she isn't a Democrat in the sense of she's not coming in to, really change things around. I mean, she's not, in my opinion, she's not some progressive Democrat that's going to come in and en masse criminalization, en masse incarceration, and start to really. I mean, she's gonna do some of it. I do believe her when she gets on here and she says, I'm going to expand the pretrial diversion, I'm going to do things like that. But hell, anybody who comes into this office really has to take a hard look at doing that for a variety of different reasons. That's not something new.
I mean this in the personal, and I actually like Kim. She's a Democrat, and I ran as a Democrat. But I think if she were to win,
that's why you're sitting here at the table.
We're the Republican. But I think she's going to face an uphill battle with people who are, very loyal to Devin Anderson.
Yeah,
and not as a party line, but as a personal matter, and someone who's attacked your someone that you cherish as your leader.
Well, and that I agree with you on that, because to me, from a standpoint of the line prosecutors getting behind somebody, to me it has more to do with the personality. You talk about Devin. She's been in that office for a number of years, in that courthouse for a number of years as a judge. I mean, look, it doesn't matter whether it's a Democrat or a Republican. If it's somebody who's one of your own, you're going to get behind him. I mean, you know, Kelly Johnson is running for judge. She's wildly popular in the prosecutor's office. If she were to run for DA as a Democrat, that'd be a really tough choice for a lot of people if she were to oppose Devin.
That might be a down the road kind of decision.
Well, but
Which would be great.
it might be, but what I'm saying is she's a very popular prosecutor, right?
Yes.
Who is a Democrat. So to me, it's not even, a lot of people want to say, well, the line prosecutors are getting behind the Republican Party. No, they're getting behind the person that they want to be behind, the person that they're loyal to, who's popular with them. Because look, if you like to prosecute, you like to prosecute. You
Right.
do. I mean, that
That
it's
should
in
be on
your
a mug
blood.
or a T-shirt. I like that
Yeah,
phrase. It
if you
sounds
like
kind
to
of-
prosecute,
Yeah.
you like to prosecute.
But what I mean is, if there's somebody who that's the one thing they love to do, that's how they like to practice law, they ain't going to become a criminal defense lawyer. They're just not. You know, I mean, it's not in their DNA to do that. And so I'm not so much. I don't think there's going to be a mass walkout, because
I don't mean a mass walkout, but I think you're going to have a level of. I just remember the transition from Magnuson to Likas, and and of course we all romanticize our time where we're a prosecutors about, oh, it was always better, or we were always under siege. But I think
under siege.
I remember feeling under siege from that we were always having to butt heads against administrations. Like basically, you wanted to do your job in spite of the administration taking away resources, or were you working there toiling away on a Sunday afternoon? No one cared about you, that sort of deal.
You know, Under Siege 1 and Under Siege 2, parenthetically, might be the best.
Is that what Steven
Perhaps.
movies of all
Seagal?
time.
Yes.
Was that Steven Seagal?
Of course it was.
Oh, all right.
But either way, I would be. I
digress.
If Kim does become the DA, I would be excited for the kind of changes she's going to bring. But it reminds me of also, maybe I'm watching too much Game of Thrones or Sun Tzu, but you've got to win over people too because you're basically at a certain level conquering and ousting someone that they love.
Yeah.
And you have to win over the folks.
I think Winning Friends and Influencing People may be.
That's one of my favorite books.
Oh, Dale Carnegie,
I'm not-
right? Dale
yeah, I
Carnegie.
tell everyone to
great.
read that book.
The other
Yeah.
one is Napoleon Hill, if you haven't read it. It's great. Think and Grow Rich. It's a great book. One of the things, though, however, let me ask you, Jason. What are your thoughts and opinions on low-level drug offenses and the idea that Kim Ogg's going to come in and kind of change that?
I remember in law school, one of my colleagues, Chris Cradaville, who is the older brother of Mark Cradaville, who's at the public defender's office. He wrote a law review article about alcoholism as being a disability for lawyers. And this is the issue of whether or not, and I can't remember specifically, but it's not simply a offense that you create as a lawyer practicing, but you're suffering from a real medical disability, right? And so we've all dealt with drug offenders, and I really do think the amount of money we waste on low-level drug offenses, and I know there's legislation now to make a lot of it either Class Cs. I mean, we've created a program that creates it like this, but I still have folks who are, for a small amount of marijuana, especially for non-documented, small amount of marijuana, who face deportation, or they can't do the program because they did something when they're 17 or 18 or something. And so it really is a huge waste of resource, and I'm glad that we're going to expand our program. Treatment is the way to go, not criminalizing and spending all this money we've been putting into, into the jail system. Harris County, I believe, is the largest single provider of mental health services in the state of Texas. A lot of those folks are self-medicating, and so I'm sure you guys feel the same way, that even though it may mean less business for us, it is something that needs to be done to better Harris County.
Yeah, but I mean, I think the argument that it's less business for us, I mean, look, it's something.
I was trying to make us look charitable.
No, well, but here's the thing. It's not, I guess a lot of those people end up getting appointed lawyers.
Right.
You know?
They're not going to hire anybody anyways.
No.
Yeah,
So, I mean, from a retention standpoint, now you could say, well, it's money out of the appointed lawyers' pockets. But I mean, that's
There are plenty of
exactly
people out there.
and there's not, and it's not something that people aren't getting rich and buying Ferraris off of appointed cases.
Right.
I mean, it's just
Well,
not.
there are a couple, but they've already been the subject of Curse Chronicle expose.
Yeah, exactly. So we won't talk about them.
One of the things that I would hope to see is that the change in the district attorney's office sponsoring bogus, worthless crimes that where the probable cause or the reasonable suspicion for the actual stop is just a waste on taxpayers' money and completely just not fair. Like, for example, if you're riding your bike at night without a headlight, the officers under the law can actually stop you, and if they think that there's something else going on, frisk you and search you. And the justification is for not having a street light on your bicycle at night. The other one we commonly see is not walking on a sidewalk where a sidewalk is provided. You know, of the thousands of cases that I've done, how many white folk in River Oaks that I have seen be arrested for not having a light on their bicycle or not using the sidewalk? Zero. They're all blacks, they're all Mexicans, and the problem I have is that the district attorney, when that cop calls in and says, hey, I got this black dude or this Mexican dude who I stopped because he wasn't using the sidewalk, and I got to search him, and guess what I found? I found some contraband or something. That district attorney's office sponsors that kind of bogus waste of taxpayer dollars, racist crap. And it's because of those
You had
things.
to really think about that.
Davey, you just switched a decaf.
That the district attorney sponsoring those kind of charges is a waste of time, a waste of taxpayer money, and a perversion of justice. And I am in favor for anyone that is going to come in and change that. And I hope that Kim Ogg, as she comes in and talks about changing these types of racist or war against these types of injustices, that I hope is not just lip service. And I hope, Ms. Anderson, that if you don't change, I hope you lose because of it. That's all I gotta say.
How do you really feel?
I'm just saying, man. It's bogus. These people are getting locked up for low-level drug crime offenses because they weren't using the sidewalk. And the district attorney is sponsoring these cops who are calling in and accepting these kind of charges.
But what happens to the cases? They get thrown out?
No, they go sit in TDC.
I know.
Or they go, right, and we have to fight these things.
Is the problem really the DA's office, or is it really the courts?
Well, here's what's happening. Let me tell you what's happening.
I mean, because here's the argument, Julio. They're going to say, look, we are supposed to enforce the laws that are on the books. That's the whole thing about trace cases and marijuana cases. And look, the law is on the books.
Right.
You know, we can sit here and debate about whether it's a BS case, a crap case, whatever. You know, but the bottom line is, to some degree, you have to say, you know, if a DA is elected and they want to enforce the laws, that's what they were elected to do.
You're right.
Well,
So I mean, look, to some degree, if it's bad PC or bad reasonable suspicion, that falls on the courts, okay? All right? Now, if it's just, we think this is crap, that's a legislative issue.
Let me tell you what's happening.
And that needs to change at the legislature.
What's happening now? I have been appointed to no less than 7 in the last 2 weeks of cases where the judge of the court finds no probable cause. However,
They go refile it.
they go to the grand jury and get that indictment. It's like, really? Really?
well, no matter what, we're not robots. There's going to be an amount of discretion that we have to have prosecutors use. And one thing I think they don't teach, and we lament it all the time, is the lack of prosecutorial discretion. And I mean that in the sense that there are only a handful of prosecutors I think because your workload, and not that they're not caring people, but they don't ever sit and think about what's my little role in the larger scheme of criminal justice. And for example, I find this argument very persuasive with prosecutors. I kind of talk about, well, what kind of policy you're setting for yourself going forward, but also the money you're spending on these little cases is the reasons why you don't get a pay raise. And Dale Carnegie talks about this in his book that you mentioned, that it's about that what you as an individual want and need in your immediate life. And so a lot of these prosecutors could say, you know what, I'm going to dismiss this case. They don't need the judge to find no probable cause. But the DA's office doesn't celebrate the prosecutor that stands up and gets rid of bad cases. They celebrate the person who tries the hard case, fails sometimes miserably, or wins, but they don't. No one celebrates the prosecutor who's like, hey, this is Joe Bob who's getting rid of all the bad PC cases. No one does that. But yes, I 100% agree, but you're never going to have a system. Otherwise, it would just be basically like you put it into a computer, spits it out, probable cause exists. There's 3 levels that people could have stopped it. The police could have stopped it, the prosecutor could have stopped it, or the judge could have stopped it. The law, you're right, the law is what it is.
Right.
Mm-hmm. So, but I do agree that maybe we don't, we want to have prosecutors who say, hey, look, we really know what's going on here. Not in every case. There's some cases that kind of BSP, legitimate but sometimes misused PC leads to you finding a serial killer.
Right.
But yes, on these low-level, majority of these cases, it's ridiculous. Why the prosecutor is re-indicting cases that someone has found no PC unless someone is killed.
Literally, judge
serious
finds no
injury.
PC.
But if it's something like small amount of dope or even a sizable amount of dope, who cares?
0.01 grams are the kind of cases that I'm, and I want to make clear that I agree with you 100%.
That's
I'm not
grand
talking
jury time that that makes me angry.
And I'm not talking about the like the cases where, okay, look, you pulled the guy over because he wasn't walking on the, or you stopped the guy because he wasn't walking on the sidewalk, and then you find a dead body or something. I'm not talking about those types of cases.
Thank God he wasn't walking on the sidewalk.
And the look that the prosecutors give, and this is why I think that some of them just can't speak because of the office. I look at them and they look at me and they say, well, that's the law. Like, that's what I got to do. And it's like, dude, take a stance. Take a stance and say no.
They don't, I mean, it's unfortunate. And I don't want to, again, blanket generalization, but you don't get rewarded for showing that kind of judgment. You really get rewarded for trying hard cases. There's the same, even when Lycus was there, she said she didn't count scalps. No offense but that was a term she used. But it's true.
That's racist.
I know. That was a term she used that you knew if you were losing trials, you were not going to get promoted. Or if you're no one count track of how many cases you dismissed, even if those dismissals were great. I remember John Jordan at least used to tell people, be careful what you ask for, because he was persuasive enough. He could get someone to, sentence someone outside the range of punishment. He was that persuasive. But he told prosecutors, really wreck to what is fair, not to what you think you can get, because you can inflame the jury. And I don't think I hear that. Every once in a while, I don't want to blanket. There's some great prosecutors who make tough decisions. But on the whole, I do agree that we are missing that notion of, part of it's being young. You're being scared as a young prosecutor to kind of make ripples, and you're protected by the law that this is PC. But yes, there needs to be changes.
Well, and Kim Ogg is saying she's going to come in and
But
change.
JV just wants a vacation, so he has less of these cases to deal
Well,
with.
I have 3 kids coming, so I think I'm just going to die at the courthouse, okay? So I'm going to be there forever. But, and I want to be clear that I don't think I could even name off more than a couple of prosecutors that most of them are good. They are good, they have good decisions, they're solid people. And even then, though, there are times when we all know what's going on and they can't make a decision because that is the office policy or that is how things go down. And Kim Sanchez is going to change some things, and I would hate if Kim came in and just didn't follow through.
I just don't think there's going to be a whole lot of changes.
And I tend to agree with you.
Because you can't. Again, it goes back to
Well, imagine the change of just having of not prosecuting trace cases, right? Remember that?
I know.
I mean, that was kind of. Now it's hard to tell people, hey, you got to do 6 months for something that 3 months ago we weren't prosecuting.
Yeah, but yeah, exactly. But
Those kind of things.
My point
Yes.
is the same with the DA's office as it is with the sheriff's office. Is Harris County's so big. The offices are so big. The jail is so big. This is like you're turning a cruise ship. You're not turning a speedboat here.
Right.
You know, and so you cannot make wholesale changes within the first week of coming in. It just doesn't happen like that. So,
But not to get Zen meditation, but you know, as big as Harris County is, every night there's only maybe 3 or 4 prosecutors that are at any given time are deciding what cases are being accepted. I mean, can you imagine how important that is?
I know.
You just changed the philosophy of 3 people, and that's how many cases get filed a day? A couple hundred.
On
That filtering system, you just have to change those policies at intake.
Sheriff Hickman was recently on the radios, which, Sheriff Hickman, if you're out there, I am inviting you right now to come on Reasonable Doubt and defend your practices. Mr. Hickman, come on this show and show us what you're made of and tell the people what you are. Okay, I digress. However, on the radio, Hickman was talking about that there are approximately 300 to 400 people that go into the Sheriff's County custody every single day. And he was talking about, one of the things he said is that his explanations as for the backlog of individuals in the county jail were because that there are seasonal spikes and that they can somewhat predict when there's going to be a spike in criminal activity. And one of them, he said, was in the summer is that it's hot and people drink a lot more. And when people drink a lot more, they get into fights and they do all kinds of things. And he said that unfortunately this year, I guess because it's been hotter than ever because of global warming, or I don't know, that the spike happened in April. And that because the spike in inmates happened so soon and months in it earlier than they would have expected, that they can't handle the jail population at the time. So 300 to 400 is what.
No, I've had clients who've been shipped to Beaumont, which is extraordinarily difficult, especially because some of them were waiting competency evaluations. But you really, it's too many, and I don't know what the MacArthur grant, whether the findings fully came out, but it's too many of these low-level offenses of people who can't make bond. And I haven't seen any change in the bonding system yet in terms of, in fact, I think it's gotten worse in certain ways where the judges are harsher on people but I haven't
it goes
seen
back to be careful what you wish for.
Yeah, I haven't seen a lot of more people making bond.
Yeah.
Even though there are a lot of young kids. I mean, I remember somebody telling me at one point bonding companies were the most powerful lobby in Texas, and no one really ever knew that. I don't know if it's true or just an urban legend. But the economic incentives.
Probably a bonding company that told you that.
Probably with the most powerful.
Don't screw with
bonding
this,
company.
Jason.
Do you know who you're dealing
But why
with?
can't
very
we just
powerful.
tweak it? What's the PR bond? But yes, we are. You've seen those people. Senator Whitmire says this the best, I think. We got to separate the people who we're scared of and people that we're mad at. And we're just housing people that we're mad at.
Yeah, let's get to Whitmire. I want to remind our viewers, we're opening up the phone line 713-807-1794 if you want to jump in on the conversation. Also at HCCLA_TV on Twitter. You mentioned Whitmire, and I want to switch topics because this guy, dude, he wants to put into our school programs how to teach our school kids, starting in high school, how to talk to the cops. He wants to teach them how to interact with officers. And, it's sad that it has come to that. It is really sad, and I'm not sure whether to think his idea is smart or ridiculous or what to really make of it. I'm stunned that we are even talking about having to teach high school kids how to talk to the cops. It seems to me, I was taught how you speak to adults. I don't know why you have to teach people why a cop is any different than an adult, other than these adults might shoot you if you say the wrong thing. But, the crazy thing here is, and I was talking about this with somebody today, is so we want to teach them how to talk with the cops and to be respectful. And it's like, well, what about teaching them that they don't have to say anything? I mean, this is all
Right.
teaching them like, yes, sir, no, sir. Basically how to capitulate.
There's no way I think this could pass.
No.
Given the racial undertones of the backlash that would occur if some sort of curriculum were to be developed for this purpose. But you're 100% right that the issue should be everyone should know how to be respectful to other people.
Yes.
It's not about necessarily positions of wearing a badge or not wearing a badge or color or religion. But you're right. I remember I would probably talk to a police officer the same way as a high school kid as I would to any adult who confronted me. I mean, if someone confronted me about, hey, why are you running in the street? You know, I'd probably talk to them the same way as if it were a cop, because we're taught that. But
Yes.
it's sad that our state of civility in this country dictates that something like this is even contemplated as being necessary. But I don't think we can ever have a curriculum because there's too many segmented parts that would never agree on a curriculum. Like, what are you supposed? Yeah, exactly. Can you imagine if? Are you supposed to answer these questions? If we were teaching people to talk to the cops,
Yeah.
I mean, the defense bar, not that anyone necessarily listens to us on a legislative level,
no.
but
But
as funneled through other organizations that are not
I mean, we tell
minorities
people
would have a
every
different
day,
view about what should be said. Yes,
shut the up.
yes.
And you know, let's teach them how to talk.
I want to hear JV because I'm sure he has strong
Well,
feelings.
we've already got educators and administrators, the teachers and administrators being trained in how to interrogate our kids
Right.
using law enforcement techniques. And now you want to put in a whole curriculum of how to basically be submissive to the cops.
Right. It's this culture of compliance. It's this. I'm sick and tired. I'm not sick and tired of it. All right. I'm just not. Look, this whole culture of compliance. It's not about, well, if you had just done what you were told, you wouldn't have got shot. Or if
Yeah.
you had just done what you have told, you wouldn't have got tased. Or if you have just done what you were told, you wouldn't be in the situation. That's not the country that I thought we lived in. It's not. It's not the life that I thought that our kids would be growing up in. And granted, I'm just like y'all. I mean, I wouldn't do anything that, you know, if an adult told me, you know, don't do this or don't do that, or I would respond respectfully.
I mean, it sounds like something they do in a dictatorship.
Right, right. I'm thinking like this is some like movie.
Seriously, you don't look up at the ceiling like that.
I think it's a little bit.
I mean, this is
It's
we're
a
gonna
heavy-handed
teach you how
approach.
today to respond to the police officers when they show up at your house.
It's a
If they
heavy-handed
want to go through
approach
your
to,
house and search it, you say yes. You know, I mean, just automated response. We got a phone call coming. Let's jump. Let's and then we'll get to your response. Let's take the call. Hello. Thank you for calling Reasonable Doubt.
Hi, thanks for taking my call. I just had a very brief comment. I'm not a parent, but as a human living in this society, I just think it's tragic that we have to teach our children how not to get killed by the police, but we can't teach police how not to kill. And that's just one thought that I had. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a great comment.
It's an amazing comment. You know, one of the things that I see my colleagues who happen to black, right? Black.
Yeah.
Some of my colleagues where they actually have to remember and tell their friends or spouses or loved ones or individuals how to act with the police, because you could get shot. Like, you could die if you weren't compliant, even if you weren't doing anything wrong. And these people are smart, educated type of individuals, but the idea that that's even a risk is scary.
Do you remember Rayford Carter?
Yes.
He used to always tell a story about how when his son would come back from college, and I think his son went to some Ivy League college, that one summer his son got stopped like 25 times by the cops in a single month.
Right.
I mean, it's some outrageous number. And it is true. And I'm fortunate. I mean, Asians, hopefully I can say this without sounding terrible, you know, I think there's certain minorities that get stopped more often, obviously, and they feel the brunt of police, law enforcement and Asian people don't have that, at least when I grew up. And so I don't know what it's like, but I remember talking to my civil procedures professor, who's a great professor, I said, and he was very educated. I said, I mean, we were talking about all these civil rights cases, and I remember he just making the comment, well, sure, I don't feel necessarily like the same average black person who's not college educated, but when I'm driving and I'm pulled over by the cops, I definitely feel like the average black guy. And so it is sad, but it's the same thing where you want to be righteous and dead, or do you want to have taught your kids something? Because it's a tough line to walk, right?
Right.
You want to tell your kids, hey, you might be 100% right, but you got to kind of kowtow, if I can use my people. You got to do certain things in order to not be killed, which is sad.
I mean, believe me, if I get pulled over, my hands are here. It's yes sir, no sir, because I'm not trying to be the test case for any of this stuff.
We got another call. Let's jump on the phone line. Hello, thanks for calling Reasonable Doubt.
Yeah, I like the discussion about the imbalance here, but isn't the law in some ways, and I am an attorney, isn't the law in some ways kind of set up against individuals to the point where we have to have this, as y'all put it, this culture of complacency or compliance? For instance, correct me if I'm wrong, but if you're charged with assault on a public servant, like a police officer, you can have a defense to that it was a wrongful arrest. But if you're charged with resisting arrest, which is a lower level offense, you do not, I believe the penal code prohibits and precludes a defense of a wrongful arrest. So if an officer is wrongfully arresting you, you're justified in assaulting them, or you can argue justification in assaulting them. If an officer is wrongfully arresting you, you cannot resist. You do not have justification if you resist them. And if I'm correct in that understanding of the law, if I'm incorrect, correct me. But if I'm correct in that, doesn't that kind of perpetuate this culture of where we have to just kind of be submissive? Thanks.
Sure.
It's a lawful for resisting. It's lawful or unlawful arrest. If you're going to claim a self-defense for assault on a peace officer, you can do that. But in the resisting, if I'm not mistaken, it's lawful or unlawful. So I think you are right on that aspect.
I don't remember what it is, but what he says sounds correct, but I don't know if that's correct with respect to the third-degree felony of assault public servant. But with respect to, like, how can you use lawful self-defense as an assault public servant or resisting? But what he said doesn't sound. It sounds more uniform that whether the person's rightfully or wrongfully arresting you, your action can't. You can't hit them or resist.
Well, you
it's not
can.
a defense.
For resisting arrest, it's lawful or unlawful. You cannot resist. However, if the officer starts to use unlawful force,
yeah, okay,
you are able to defend yourself.
Yes, that would sound correct.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's hard, obviously, as a white male to sit here and comment on this. It really is. I mean, because you come from a perspective where people are like, yeah, what do you know, white boy? Kind of thing. But I mean, no, it's true. It's a different perspective that everybody has on this, and you can take one school of thought and say, well, I understand that black people, Mexican people, and other minority groups are being, singled out in this stuff, and I've never experienced that to the level that other people have. But, I've been pulled over by the cops. I've been interrogated by police. And I tell you what, it is scary. It's not a situation you want to be in. And I mean, even though as a white male, I may not, everybody thinks, oh, you ain't going to get shot. Okay, that may be statistically true.
But you might.
And I'm just not, I'm of the opinion, like, I'm not going to pipe up here.
Right.
And so the culture of compliance is not necessarily, in my view, one of, oh, hell, I'm going to get shot. It's just like, dude, I don't want any trouble here. And from a perspective of also, the more compliant you look on the video, I think that, it helps you out in court. But that's just my perspective, and I know it's hard as a white male to sit here and give that perspective because so many people have been through other things. But anytime I see a video of a client of mine and they just, regardless of the race, and believe me, I've seen white people go off on cops, and guess what? They get tased, they get thrown up against the wall, they get thrown on the ground, and I'm just like, dude, your first mistake was mouthing off to the cop. So it's a little bit different, but we got another call coming in. Let's get to that because I'm going off on a tangent here. But Hello. Thanks for calling Reasonable Doubt.
Hi. I had a comment about the idea of teaching in schools how people should address police officers, and the comment, I think you made the comment that we're raised to be taught how to speak to adults, and there's validity to that. But the thing is, you still can't talk to a police officer exactly the way you would talk to an adult, because there's such a narrow degree of tolerance that I think that, and I don't know how it would be done, and it probably would never get done, but I really think it's in the best interest of every teenager to really know how to protect themselves in that kind of situation. And it's not just because they might get killed, which certainly is horrible, but they might get the hell beat out of them.
Yeah.
And I have African American friends who have told their children just flat out, I mean, in no uncertain terms, about what to do and what not to do. And I've talked to y'all before. If you remember, I was on the grand jury.
Yes.
Yeah, you sounded familiar.
Yeah, and after I started being on that grand jury, I told my kids, that they needed to be careful, because there's not a lot of tolerance.
No,
it doesn't seem.
You make a great point about the tolerance thing, because, I think that in this day and age, with cell phones, with social media, with just everything, and part of it too is, I think kids, teenagers especially, they know how to game the system now. I mean, the level of disrespect starting at a young age, and I know how to get CPS involved or something. It starts very early on, and so I do think that there's a tolerance issue, and police officers have a lot less tolerance for things. I mean, I remember being in high school and early on in college, where underage drinking, a cop might show up at a party, and unless things were just really out of control, probably not a lot of people were going to jail. You might get a PI citation or a minor in possession citation at most and go on down the road, But today, police officers come in and they see a bunch of minors drinking, regardless of race.
Right.
Guess what? Everybody's going to get lit up.
Well, and I like to dovetail on what the caller said and what you said, Jimmy. I think we're seeing it's more of tolerance, regardless of race, regardless of ethnicity, regardless of socioeconomic status. I think that we are seeing now, no matter what race the officer is or what race the individual is, there is confrontation there. And I think that's a societal issue, and I think it's actually transcending race and social class. I don't know. What do you think, Jason?
Reminds me of something Judge Stanley used to always say, which I think is very true, is that one of the biggest sources of people losing their temper is feeling that they're being disrespected. And both as the person who's being investigated, when you feel like the officer is not addressing your rights, you feel disrespect. And of course, cops, contempt of cop, which is apparently, sometimes a capital death offense now these days. When those cops feel disrespected, and we've created, as a byproduct, unintended byproduct of a movement, was for people to respect cops less. And I don't think it was intentional, but that's the kind of end results of some of this, is that, and the cops huddle up together and they feel disrespected, so they're going out and they really feel, and you're already on that edge.
Yep.
You feel this somebody's mouthing off like, oh, I've got rights, and you do have rights. But the human aspect of what causes things to happen is what we really got a problem for. And we can't come up with these panacea kind of ideas of, hey, let's all get to know each other and hug cops. It's more fundamental than that, because most of the times the cops that we see, I mean, I used to know the cops in high school. We knew the handful of cops who were there, but now there's such a disconnect between it, and these are just, we don't have the same.
Well, the idea of calling officers peace officers, right? Now we call them law enforcement officers. I mean, I think just the name of itself, a peace officer, versus law enforcement officer, just the connotations of that, coupled with the militarization of the police force, coupled with the tensions that are going through the states now. I think it's an incredible time to be alive and to witness these types of things.
Yeah, and I don't know how to make people more empathetic to each other's situations. That's probably the biggest thing, is the lack of empathy for both sides. We see one side, which is the people who we feel get harassed, or we kind of see the worst parts of society because we just deal with people who are either criminals or put themselves in a position where they're being accused of crimes. And I don't know how we get officers to necessarily see what it's like to see it from the,
Right.
arrestee's position, and us also to see it from the other way.
Well, but most people don't see it until they are the person with the cuffs on and in the back of the car.
Oh yeah, we've all heard.
It's-
Yes, of course. I mean, we've seen cops who suddenly now have their right to the most important things that ever happened and ever, because they're being charged with a crime.
Yeah.
Well, that's why I think we got a phone.
We got a call?
Yeah, I'm watching the monitor.
Hey, why don't you bring it in, Jason?
All right, we've got a call. Caller, what can we do for you this evening?
That's your intro?
Hello?
Yes. Hi.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, I was just going to say that, and I'd called before, but what happens, is it's kind of training. It's a process that police go through in arresting a person, and they go. If you take it step by step, you break it down into individual steps. You want a different outcome than people getting killed. And the other thing, or just being harassed or whatever. But the other thing is that, JV has to realize is they kill white people too. They don't
Right.
they don't care if they think they're in danger. They're going to kill anybody they
right.
feel it. And in Harris County, they just no-bill these guys. It doesn't matter.
Right.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of my point is, I mean, I've seen people, regardless, I've seen white people who have gotten tased.
Yeah.
I've seen 15-year-old white kids in some of the higher end areas of town who've gotten tased
Right.
over the objection of the complaining witness. I mean, so stuff happens.
And this is why I say, and I agree with you, caller, that I think it's transcending race and ethnicity at this point. Like, for example, the recent Metro beating at the light rail station.
Yeah.
It was a black cop, black dude, and we've seen that now for some time, and I think it's transcending. I think the real issue is the conflict between law enforcement and the public, and I don't know how to go about changing that. I don't know. We asked Sheriff Gonzalez, right? He's not even the sheriff yet. We
know who you're voting for. Man, way to stay neutral, Julio.
We asked the sheriff, and he said one of his big things was to reach out to the community and to try to change the community relations, which I think could be a big deal.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I want to get to something else before we get out of here because we got about 10 minutes left here. There was an interesting opinion from the Attorney General's office at a College Station. There's a high-profile case going on up there right now, and I say it's high-profile, but it involved the death in a drug overdose of a student at A&M in one of the fraternities, and the AG's office ruled that the city didn't have to release what is normally public documents, the 911 calls, other pieces of evidence that normally you could get through a Public Information Act request. And the AG's office said, no, you don't have to release that stuff. You can hold it back. And I understand that there's a lot of stuff going on. There's an ongoing criminal investigation. With this case, given the facts, I can understand it. But what caught my eye about this was that you've got the AG coming in and issuing this opinion. The problem for me is I don't like when they hold back public documents, okay? And I think it's really problematic given what we saw in Charleston and in Tulsa with regard to the videos and how the release of those videos was handled by the different cities. Tulsa, they released everything immediately, and the officer was charged within a matter of days. In Charleston, or Charlotte, I'm sorry, Charleston, why am I saying Charleston? Charlotte, they didn't release the video, and they waited a week or more before releasing the video. And I don't think when the video was released, it was actually released by the police. It was actually a cell phone video from somebody else that was the first video that was released. And so this goes back to my whole problem of government transparency. And, you know, maybe there's some justification in this case, but even then, I'm still not very comfortable with holding back otherwise public documents. I mean, we have a huge problem right now with just getting the stuff we're supposed to get in accordance with the discovery rules. And so when you make it tough to get otherwise publicly accessible documents, and you've got the AG's office saying, yeah, it's all right, College Station, keep that stuff back. I have a real problem with that.
Well, I don't know whether or not this was an issue that wouldn't be available to the defense lawyers, like in the same way we get documents and we can't release documents we receive, or whether it's a public release issue. You know, I think this is something we all kind of struggle, the way our society has become, the sensationalization of crimes, the need for immediate resolution of something that's a very complex issue. You know, I feel like something dramatic happened like it did in the police shootings, and we expect to have like an answer within an hour of what happened. You know what I mean?
Right.
And we want everything to be released and full resolution.
On Twitter, on Facebook.
On Twitter, of course, on all these things. So if it's not, it needs to be released to those who need to see it, including defense counsel, whether it's a public issue or not. And I haven't read the full justification, but I think, I'm leaning towards how you feel, which is we need to have transparency. And if that means we as a society have to grow into a more mature audience base where we're not, you know, pitchforks at the first sign of something wrong and, oh, wait, if we saw the real light, the lighting is different, then something else happens.
Hey, this is the Triple J Ranch.
us.
People might show
Right.
up with pitchforks, all right?
Right, we're
Wild
located at
West.
this address. But I do agree that if the bedrock of our society is that we are a democratic society that allows us to be informed and make decisions based on that. If it's hard information, we need to still hear it. I do understand the issues of privacy, of embarrassment. Oftentimes, a lot of the stuff that's released, people are embarrassed by and become ridiculed for. Those issues are important. But if it's an issue about we don't know what the officers really did or if the frat did anything wrong, it feels like a cover-up.
Yeah.
Right.
know.
It does.
It does. It feels like a total cover.
It does. And I am the last person that will ever play the race card, but it feels like I'm doing it a lot today. Does it? But I'm thinking, like, is it the fact that, I mean, it's A&M, it's a white frat, and there's a couple dead bodies, and we're just gonna go ahead and just be quiet. I hate to think that. Why am I even talking about it? But I'm saying, like,
No, it feels like a cover-up because that's what
something's
happens at
going on.
fraternities.
Yeah, that's another issue.
I mean,
We got a few minutes left, but before we get out of here, I want to get your thoughts, guys, on this attack ad that the GOP ran last week leading up to the debate, the vice presidential debate. That was just it's like watching two pieces of dry toast argue which one was more flavorful. But
what do you think? What are you saying?
No, I remember. I think
I
it's.
saw that on
It's,
Facebook.
yeah, no, I thought no. He is the point. I thought it's true. It was not exciting.
The most interesting part was the attack ad that the Republicans release leading up to it, where they go after the GOP. The GOP goes after Tim Kaine for being a criminal defense lawyer, and we saw them kind of do this with Hillary, and this one was even worse. I mean, it's a video. America deserves better. And I kind of wanted to get behind Kaine a little bit, but then he did so terrible in the debate. I was like, oh man, come on, dude. But somebody had said, well, why aren't more people getting into criminal defense? There's a lot of very smart lawyers out there. Why aren't they putting their talents toward criminal defense? And I said, look at attack ads like that. Because if you ever want to be in politics, the last thing you want is an attack ad like that run on you. But for me, it's like, and I know a lot of criminal defense lawyers chimed in and said, oh, the Republicans don't believe in the Sixth Amendment. This is,
right.
If ever there was a doubt, this confirms it now. I mean, there's a chorus of boos, to say the least.
No one stands up for criminals, right?
Exactly.
So
when you do.
Well, not just that. In the notion, remember when Donald Trump also said that
the right to counsel is
or like,
ruining this country.
I can't believe we're giving this guy medical care,
Yeah.
or we're giving this guy an attorney. He's probably getting the best attorney around. You know, I think we all want that, so whatever happens is the correct result.
Right.
But it's an easy target for anyone to pick on those who are accused of a crime, because no matter what, who's going to defend you on that issue? Who's going to stand up for these folks, even though it really is, we're standing up for all of us. But it really shows, I think, and not that we're saying that Democrats know it better, but that a good criminal justice system protects all of us.
Exactly.
It gets rid of the real criminals can go to jail, and their cases don't get overturned and they're released, and the people and the cops who are jackboot thugs in these BS cases don't have to waste our time in the juries.
And what I don't think people realize too, and there are a lot of big firms that are huge GOP donor firms. I mean, the White Shoe Ivory Tower firms, they do this kind of work. They do the habeas work. They do the capital appeals. They do that as part of their either pro bono or reduced legal fees, helping out on the federal side on the CJA panel, on the Criminal Justice Act panel. And they get involved in stuff like this. I mean, look at Sussman Godfrey getting involved in the bail lawsuit.
Right.
I mean, so to me, the irony of it was that the GOP seems to be this whole attack ad notion. It's like, well, wait a second.
What's minority outreach?
Yeah.
Clearly, it's their most effective form of minority outreach. Irony. I'm just kidding, everyone.
I was going to say, wait, no, what?
I mean, this is just. But they also make a calculation as to this riles up their base.
Exactly.
But doesn't. But whether black voters respond in kind in terms of turning out, they know the numbers, and everyone knows about whether or not that segment who would be most offended by it, including undocumented, they can't vote, right?
Right.
Will Hispanics be offended enough to come out and vote? It's a calculation. They know it. I mean, it's how cynical I am about this process. But the GOP knows they can get their angry base out to vote, and the people who should be most offended by it.
Pitchforks.
Yeah. I mean, they should have people just carrying pitchforks.
But
right
both sides,
into the voting booth.
sides have that. Both sides have the pitchforks and attack dogs out. I mean, let's be honest.
Jason, what do you think? I mean,
It's not unique to the.
Well, but it's what gets Democratic voters excited is not the same as what obviously gets Republicans. We addressed this in 2014. What gets the biggest base in Harris County for Democrats is black females. What gets them out to vote? Issues of law enforcement get them out to vote. But that has not really been, at a national level, it's kind of taken the wayside to personality attacks. But that's what the issue is for a lot of African Americans, and this happened in that last election cycle, that no one was addressing that biggest concern. I think we're addressing it in the Harris County in this DA election, which that's why I think this is going to be, whatever turns out nationwide, Harris County will actually just be kind of more it's more individualized. I mean, there's been a lot more stories about the DAs than we normally would expect.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's an interesting election year. That's for sure.
And we're going to switch JV to decaf.
No,
We're going to work on your ability to answer phone calls too.
we're already winding down, I think,
We
and
are-
it's
we are winding down.
This
8:58.
was an hour
Jason,
show. This
This is an hour show.
crazy.
Where did you go to undergrad, Jason?
Rice.
Awesome. Yeah. Right. But
Breaking stereotypes every day.
but it's 8:58, and
Hanson
you
No,
still.
that's not how it goes.
Oh, well. Hey, go
It's-
Horns. I'm calling it. Calling it this weekend, okay, everybody?
The outro probably needs a little work. Where'd you go to? Did you go to?
I'm a Longhorn, dude.
TNT. On Julio's horrible game prediction, ladies and gentlemen, that's all the time we have for this week. We'll be back next week with another episode of Reasonable Doubt. Good night. See you later.